Welcome to the series on BlueWorx, a leading solution to mobilise your SAP Plant Maintenance operations. I'm Craig Bennett and I work for ZAG as their Product Development Manager. ZAG has been successfully selling, implementing and supporting our customers using SAP for over 20 years. Today, ZAG has over 80 customers in New Zealand and Australia, and we support BlueWorx customers globally. BlueWorx is a world-class solution. It includes many innovations designed to help you achieve meaningful business value. In this video series, we'll set out to provide you with insights into it. We'll demonstrate its ease of use, versatility, and the unprecedented width and depth of its functionality. I hope you find value in this and the other videos, not just in terms of BlueWorx, but also in providing you insights into some of the concepts, challenges, and approaches to mobilising your SAP asset management. If you have any questions about BlueWorx and how it might be applied to your operations, then please get in touch. This video is the second in the BlueWorx Insight series on the topic of inspections. In the first video, I focused on explaining our approach to inspections and some key concepts. In this one, I'll demonstrate an inspection being undertaken in BlueWorx and then show how it's configured in the BlueWorx admin. I'll also touch on the inspection viewer application as well. By the end of this video, you should have a good understanding of how you configure BlueWorx to meet your asset management inspection needs. Right, let's get started. This is BlueWorx, and what I'm first going to do is locate a work order that I've set up an inspection against. So I go into my work list and I've set up a kiln inspection. Open up the work order and I can see that there is an inspection available. Now it's been assigned at an operational level and it's a monthly inspection. It's got a red flag and that means that it's a required inspection, and I won't be able to complete this work order unless I have completed all the mandatory inspections. So if, for example, I try to set it to complete, then it's going to tell me that I can't. When I open up the inspection, I get a list of all the questions and any responses, and I also have a little flag running down the side here showing me that the questions within this set are required to be completed. You'll note at the moment that the run hours one isn't, and I'll address that later when we go into the config area and correct that. I can get some additional information on it. This is just a sample picture I picked up on the web just to demonstrate that we can embed images, and you can put tables or rich text in here as well. Now, one of the features is that we can have a look at previous inspections that may have been undertaken for this asset. If you're online, this functionality is available. We're going to call SAP directly. So if I go and open up the inspection viewer, then we get a list of the inspections that have been undertaken. I've done a few over the last few days just to set this up. We can drill down and see the details of the questions. We'll have a look at this in a little bit more detail later. So back to my inspection questions. One of the things that we can do and that I've used in setting this up is using some rules to show or hide questions as may be appropriate. So in setting this one up, I've used rules to show or hide certain questions that are only appropriate when the kiln is non-operational. So I just want you to have a look. You can see a list of the questions at the moment. If I go through and answer the first one, so it's popped up and it's asked me, is the kiln operating? And I'm going to say no. And you'll see as I complete this that several other questions pop up in the background. So we can now see refractory and a few other things like burner has popped up. There's the run hours. So in this case, I know that this is go and update the measurement point, but as an operator, I don't necessarily need to know that level of detail. It's giving me instructions and expecting a response, and I can complete that. And so in this case, it's going to work through a series of other questions. You can see it's asked, is the lubricant okay? And if I select yes, then I can carry on. Here's another one in terms of condition grading. I can select that's good, for example. And here's another one demonstrating the use of a yes, no. If I, for example, in the way that I've set this up, select no on this, the temperature of the roller path, then it's going to insist that I go and create a notification as a result. I could set it up to silently do that, but in this case, it's going to force me to, if I choose this response, to create a notification. So I'll just select that back to yes. Here's one that is going to do a measurement point for me. And more on the condition grading. Now we can set the condition grading ones up so that either can insist that the operator goes and raises a notification like this, or we can do it silently, but it'll insist that you put some comments in. Okay, so I've entered some text there. As I've said, what's going to happen when I complete this inspection and the results are processed in SAP, that a notification will be created based upon a notification template that I've already set up in the config area, and I'll take you through that in the subsequent steps of this demonstration. So I'm going to save that. Here's an example that you can put pictures and stuff in, and we'll just carry on and move through some of these. I could in fact add attachments to any of these questions as well that's been configured. If I upload a file, then that will be processed back into SAP. So you might use that for example, if you're on a mobile device, you'd be taking a photo. You could use that for the condition of that. And it's now showing that there's an attachment there. Move on to the next one. And we'll just complete these out. And in this case, I've also got a signature type question. I've put it in here for demonstration purposes. The fact that I'm an authenticated SAP user is enough generally, but there can be circumstances where processes require a signature. And that's it. I've moved through and completed all of those, and I can now complete the overall inspection. And that's been done. And I can now complete the order. And it's asked me to put some time in. It's likely that this would have taken a fair amount of real time in order to do this. And I'll go and save that as a confirmation. It's now ready to process in SAP. So I'll synchronize that. Now, as this is a demonstration system, the inspection updates will happen in real time, but in a production mode, we recommend that you use a batch job to process that. That's because if any of these inspection results don't work, in other words, or for example, you might be trying to update a characteristic that doesn't exist, or take a measurement reading against a measurement point that hasn't been set up, then the person doing the job can't do anything about that, and it becomes an administration responsibility to get the master data right. So rather than making the operator wait around while all of those are processed, and there could be quite a few inspections that have been queued up, we just push that across to the SAP system and then have batch job go through and process it. Okay, that's an inspection done. Right, so now let's go and have a look at the processing results of that inspection. I'm going to go back into my functional location, and because I'm online, I can have a look at the inspection history for this asset. It's actually this order that I just completed, so I'll go and have a look at the inspection questions that we just walked through. So this is the permanent record of the questions and results that were done. Let's have a look at a few of these. For example, hours. This is the one that I said would go and create a measurement document against a measurement point. Here was what I was asked. Here there was the old and the new values. There's a report that I'll come back to, and there's some configuration values saying that it's a single value numeric and that it's going to process it by document measurement document creation, and it's tied into the characteristic against that measurement point through the op hours. Go and have a look at another one, the condition of the roller path. This is a condition grading one where I marked it as being poor. So I was asked this question, I marked it as poor, and you'll recollect at the time that I entered in some comments and said that I would show you later how this transformed silently into a notification when processing in SAP automatically, as opposed to forcing the user to create it on the device. And I'll go into SAP shortly and show you that. Just take a note of this notification number. Another one was refractory condition. So in that case, if you remember that nice bright picture, we captured an attachment at the time. So here's the attachment that I went and captured. And lastly, a signature question. It had my signature image captured along with my name and company. So while we're here, what we can also do is, for every one of these questions, you can launch a report that you configure, or an administrator configures in the administration, which sources report data from the SAP system using a smartphone. You can make your own, but we do provide this sample one. So this is particularly good if you've got to provide a paper or PDF copy to a third party, maybe it's a customer or a regulatory authority, on the inspection and the inspection results. You can add more detail to this as you require. So now let's pop across to the SAP GUI and see how this has been processed in SAP. Here's the functional location that we were inspecting. Go and have a look at the measurement points and counters. Have a look at the operating hours. Measurement documents. It's actually this one. And here's the document that's been created. So the other thing that I discussed was the notification. So we'll go and have a look at that. The notification number that was recorded in the inspection results. And what's happened is, here's the notification. All of this text has come from a notification template, which I'll explain we configure in the BlueWorx admin. It said that I gave a rating of 4, which was poor, against that scale. And here's the notes that I collected in the comments area of the inspection question, in which you just saw in the inspection viewer results. So it's nice and tightly coupled with all the data existing in SAP and having the ability to audit easily. Now I'm going to switch across to the administration area, and we'll take a look in a little bit more detail around how that was all set up, and we'll go and make some changes. Okay, so here we are in the BlueWorx administration application, and I'm going to go into maintain inspection templates. I've already filtered on the inspection that we're going to have a look at, and we'll work through some of the other tabs across the top as we move through this explanation. So here's our kernel inspection. First thing is that around the top you have the title of the inspection and an ID that gets used to link it through to the questions and everything else that's to do with it. Moving on from there, we have an action that can happen where an inspector doesn't actually find the asset, so they're sent out to inspect something on a work order and they don't find it. You have the option of either saying that they can mark it as not found and there'll be no action, or automatically create a notification using a template, which I'll cover the use of templates, or force them to create a notification on the device. So if they go out there, they don't find the asset, they have to create a notification. The next one is the navigation type. So we have the option to either continue to the next question or to exit the question list. So you'll remember from the demonstration that as I answered one question, it automatically moved to the next. because of the setting. It said continue to next. And that's suitable where you can predetermine a logical sequence of maybe moving around an asset and undertake inspection steps. If you have an asset where you're more likely to self-drive where it is you're going to go to next, then on each response to a question you'll pop back out to the list. And we can further control that down at the question level. There's some inspection information which is maintained, and a rich text editor pops up and allows us to put in long text formatting and images, etc. So the next thing that I'm going to look at, and we're still talking really about the shape of the inspection, is the question groups. So you may recollect that there were a number of groups in our question list, and within them there was one or more questions, and this is how they get associated. So you can create groups and reuse them across multiple inspections. And drilling into a group, I'll drill into this one, I can see that there's 2 questions allocated to that, and that is the kiln operating and the run hours. So this is how we start building up the questions. So I'll just move back, and we're back in the main inspection area. The next item to have a look at is the objects. So this is where we would determine what assets and orders this inspection should connect with. From left to right we have an object type, so it's either going to be a functional location or an equipment. The technical object type, so that's coming from what you've configured and then assigned at the equipment or the functional location level. You can also use a category. You can use a characteristic and then the characteristic value. You can use an order type, so it's specific to an order type, and you can use an operational standard text. So you can use one or more of these to control what is available. So in this case I've set this up so that I could actually show this against the functional location directly, what I'd call an ad hoc inspection. That wouldn't be a typical use case, but we're going to use that so that we can actually see changes immediately without having to go and set up another order. And it's a good way to do it when you just want to test out an inspection and changes that are being made. This is the line that actually drove it connecting and being shown in the order that we just had a look at, because it was a PMO3 order. It had an inspection monthly standard text key. It was for a functional location, and that functional location had a technical object type of kiln rotary. And because the required switch was on, I wasn't allowed to complete the order until I had completed this inspection. I can use rules within an inspection to control what questions are shown or hidden, and we saw that as an example, and I'll go into it in a little bit more detail as we move through this demonstration. And we have translation values for the inspection and long text, so I can maintain it for whatever languages that I want, and adapt the photo, etc. In this case I haven't put the photo in, but I've just maintained the text value that I had in the main area, in this case in German. We'll now take a detailed look at some of the inspection questions in terms of their configuration. But before I do, I wanted to highlight there's full documentation available on inspections, and in this case the inspection question. This is available in the BlueWorx support site. And while I'll touch on just a few of the available options, just take note that there's a full list of a lot of different value types that we can use to fulfill whatever business requirements you have. So the first question we'll have a detailed look at is the run hours, and just work through some of the fields and give you an explanation on selected ones. The ID field's pretty self-explanatory. The short description is the one that we see at the top of the screen where we're looking at a question, and then we can enter additional instructional text. We can edit through a rich text editor. We can put tables and photos in there as required. The reference URL and description is for use where in an online scenario, when you're answering a question, if you need to refer off to an available repository that you can access via the browser on the device or desktop, then you can use that. Over in the response and processing section, the first up is the response type. So these are the basic things we allow. Either an update to a characteristic for the equipment or function location, an equipment or function location master data update, the creation of a measurement document, or take no SAP action, or update the user status of the equipment or functional location record. In this case, it's a measurement document creation. Response type is a single value numeric, and it's linked to the measurement point for the, in this case, functional location, but it could be equipment, using this characteristic. Optionally, you can use a measurement position if you have multiple measurement points all sharing the same characteristic. That's the setup that you make in your functional location or equipment. If you have a measurement point category and code group, and then you can maintain those optionally. In this case, we're not managing the allowed values and working our way down through the list. There's no requirement for hide a characteristic. We don't want to hide the current value, so in other words, showing the last reading. We want to show that in this case. There's no requirement to create a notification, which I'll touch on in another question. The answer is mandatory. In other words, if I use this question in an inspection, I must answer it to complete the inspection. And the GPS is not appropriate for this one. I don't have to enter any comments, and at the moment attachments are not allowed, and I'll come back to that in a second. In terms of navigation type, so this is where we either continue to move to the next question having completed this one, or we pop back out to the list. So the standard is to inherit from the inspection template setting, but we can individually control it. So you could drop out, you could answer an answer group, and then you could drop back out to the list again if you so desire. In terms of the question groups, so this one question is being used in 3 different question groups, so you only have to set up this once and you can use it in multiple inspections. It's not being used in any rules, and I haven't translated it into any other languages. Now let's just come back though. Now what I wanted to focus on for purpose of demonstrating is this attachments allowed. You'll notice at the moment that it's been set to off. Let's switch over to BlueWorx and have a look at this inspection. And I'll just start one up just for purposes of demonstration. Here's my run hours, drill into that, and you can see there's no availability for me to go and create or upload an attachment or take a photo. So I'll just close that and delete that set. Switch back over to my admin side, and I'm going to now say that attachments are allowed because the scenario is that you want to take a photograph of the reading or the odometer or whatever it is, the meter. I'll save that, switch back over to BlueWorx, and since I'm online it's going to do this all nice and real time. If you're on a mobile device, then I would do it when we sync. So here's our question, run hours, drill into it, and now have the ability to add attachments. Pretty simple. So the next question we're going to take a look at is the condition of the roller path, and I've used this in some of the other scenarios. You'll recollect that it was that check for pitting, etc. And in this case, the response is not actually going to take any direct action in SAP as a result of answering this question. It's a checklist question. It's going to ask for a single value string as the response type, and it's going to go and get the values that are allowed from an answer group. And I'll explain that soon. It's going to hide the current value because you're making an assessment based upon what's in front of you, not what has previously been done. And again, it's mandatory. In this case, attachments are allowed, which only makes sense. And the answer group that it's going to use, so in other words, this setting has said I want to use an answer group to maintain the values that the person can select. And the answer group is condition grading demo. So let's go and have a look at that. I'm just going to pop out and I'm going to have a look at my answer groups and filter on that particular answer group. Right, so this answer group can be used across multiple questions, and it's like a list of values that you can use. The answer group ID and the question that we're seeing, and we can see that it's active. In this case, we've got 5 responses that can be provided. So there's the value, there's the description, there's the sort. So the special bit comes though around the notification, template and type. So what we're saying here, and you'll recollect when I answered this question, is that I said that it was poor. The setting for that is automatically create the notification using a template on completion in the SAP system. The template that was used was a general condition, and the comment is compulsory. Had I answered a 5, it would have insisted that I create a notification, and I specify the notification type. Right, so let's go and have a look at this template, and we can then explain how those values arrived in the notification that we saw. Right, so we're in the notification template area now, and this is the general condition template. So this is a template for creating notifications silently. We have an identity and a name. We select a notification type from those available. We set the notification priority, and then we set the values for the short and the long text. So how this works is that we use placeholder values in the short and the long text to replace values sourced from the question and the responses by the inspector. So the next area to have a look at is inspection rules. And we can use rules to show and hide questions and make them mandatory if necessary. You'll recollect from the previous demo that when I made the response to this question, is the kiln operating while inspecting, that additional questions, if I said no, were suddenly exposed in the list. Let's go and have a look at how I did that. Over in the BlueWorx administration and inspection rules, this is the rule that was making that change as I answered that question. So this is how the rule config looks. We have a simple title, we can make notes about how we're using it, and then we have a series of conditions and then actions on the basis of the outcome of those conditions. So here's the conditions. The source type is an inspection question. It could be any of these things to evaluate. So in other words, you can influence which questions are shown or hidden or made mandatory based upon equipment values or characteristic values for the equipment or the function location, the work order fields, or in this case, the inspection question. So it's going to evaluate the response to the kiln 0012 inspection question, and it's going to evaluate the first response. So simple questions only have one responses, but other questions can have multiple values that are returned. And it's going to say as a operator that the response equals no. So evaluate this question, and if the response equals no, then it passes. Now based upon that, actions are carried out, and there's an action on pass and an action on fail if you configure it. So in this case, if it passes, then these questions are made mandatory. And if it fails, then these questions are hidden. So looking at the condition, is the kiln operating while inspecting? No equals true. Therefore, these questions are all going to be exposed. Is the kiln operating? Yes. Then all these questions will be hidden. And we can go and test the rule as well. Very simply, no, run the rule. The rule passed. Any other response, the rule fails. Pretty powerful way in order to be able to configure, change and refine your inspection questions based upon previous responses or things about the asset itself that can influence what questions you might ask. And that's it for inspection rules. So the last bit to discuss in the inspection config area is the download and upload function. This allows us to download a series of CSV files of the inspection configuration that we have, and then manipulate them and upload them again. It's particularly good for when you're converting a lot of data or you're shifting it between systems. So the download is fairly simple. One button to push, and it pushes a whole heap of files to your download directory. And this is what that looks like. And those files can be manipulated and then uploaded again. And for each file that was downloaded, there's a separate upload. Instructions for how that all works is all in the online support guide. And the final area I want to look at is the inspection log. So while this area is like configuration that's not often changed, inspection log is an operationally monitoring area to review the inspections that maybe there's some errors with. So if I come into here, it gives me a list of all of the inspection processes that have occurred recently, and if I filter the list, I'll just get the errors. So I'll just have a look at the errors, and we'll have a look at a few of these. This is just out of a demonstration system. So for example, there is a voltage question here, and if I click on that, then it's given an error status, and it's saying, well, the characteristic and it's showing that this characteristic wasn't found for this object. So the new value was provided, and the configuration was to update this voltage characteristic, but when it went and tried to do that against this equipment, it found that that characteristic wasn't maintained. So it's a classic master data problem. There's only two logical outcomes for this. Either the question was asked in error, so the inspection was set up wrong, in which case you should be adjusting the inspection, or the equipment master data hasn't been set up properly, and maybe the class hasn't been assigned. So the options are to manually go and adjust the value, in which case we can actually go and edit it, and in this case that's not appropriate. We can ignore it, or we can reprocess it. Now, reprocessing is going to get the same results in this case. It's more likely that I would go and add the correct class with this characteristic to the equipment record and then elect to reprocess it. If it was, for example, a mistype for whatever reason and the value was completely incorrect, then I can actually go and edit the response and change it to something else, and then save and reprocess it. So in this case, it's not going to actually work, but for some inspection questions, it will. And the good news is that the changes that have been made are recorded in some change notes down the bottom, and who did it. And we can also look at some summary analysis of the inspections that have occurred, and export a log of all of the records as well if we need to. So that concludes this video on inspection demonstrations and configuration. I hope you found it useful. If you're looking for more information online, then that's accessible through the BlueWorx product support site. You can also download our sample application for Apple and Android and try BlueWorx out for yourself. If you want to know more about anything you've seen, then please get in contact with either Carl or I. We'd be happy to answer any queries you have or organise a demonstration for you. Thank you for your time.